Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Chair. Morning, honorable members on a Friday morning.
Molweni, manene le manenekazi.
Morning, everyone. It is now 9 o'clock. Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, colleagues, officials from the National Treasury and the stakeholders. As you know, today is a continuation of our public consultation, during which the National Treasury will respond to submissions made in the revised fiscal framework and revenue proposals. The order will be, honorable members, we give the National Treasury the opportunity to make a presentation. We allow stakeholders to engage in the presentation, and if necessary, we also allow the PBO and FFFC to engage the National Treasury. Once that is done, I will open the floor for members of Parliament to engage the National Treasury. We will give National Treasury 40 minutes to make their presentation. It is now your time, National Treasury. I now hand over to you.
Yes, apologies, Chair. Sorry for that. Let me introduce myself. My name is Edgar Sishi. I am the head of the budget office at the Treasury. The DG sends his apologies. I don't think he's been able to make it, but I'm here in his stead and on behalf of the Treasury. Firstly, just to thank honorable members and the committee for this opportunity to respond to the public hearings today. I will try and share my screen, and as I do so, let me also indicate that given as you've indicated, Chairperson, the approach as it relates to the presentation. We have been given 40 minutes according to the agenda. Of course, given the fact that there is a lot of detail that came out in the hearing, and a lot of questions were asked. The 40 minutes that we've been given means that I have to rush through, along with my colleagues, a number of details quite quickly. And because of that, and because of the fact that there will be other follow-ups, both from the stakeholders as well as from the members, I want to note the fact that some of the things may not be covered in detail, and we have included an annex to the slides, so that things that I may not have been able to cover in the presentation, colleagues and members will have looked through themselves, given the limited time that we've been given. There were numerous submissions that were made that we went through and took into account in crafting these responses, and they are listed there. Just by way of introduction, it is important to reiterate the point which we have made during the 6th Parliament about the approach that we take to the MTBPS and, of course, other budget documents. We remain dedicated to transparency, and we continue to be one of the top-rated countries in the world in terms of the transparency of our budget documents. But in addition to that, Honourable Chair and members, we continue to request and welcome feedback from different stakeholders. A number of the stakeholders that presented during the course of Tuesday and Wednesday, actually, we talked to them separately in bilaterals during the course of the year. So some of the views that were expressed are views that we're aware of, and indeed a number of them have been long-standing positions of a number of the stakeholders. We continue to invite engagements with them, including in respect of information that we can provide in cases where it is not confidential. And as indicated in the rest of the presentation there, we have taken numerous steps to improve both the ease of access and the transparency of budget documents. As you will see, not just now, but more importantly in February, when we tabled the budget and the medium-term budget framework and fiscal framework, as well as the division of revenue at the time, all spreadsheets, data, graphs, and raw data and information will be placed and continues to be placed on the National Treasury website. We also sought to improve ease of access by introducing a children's guide to the budget this year, in addition to the existing People's Guide. Members will also have noted the fact that along with the MTBPS, we published a People's Guide to the MTBPS itself that provides an easy-to-read and accessible description of the information that is a part of the MTBPS. The next set of slides indicate key things in respect of how through the MTBPS and other measures, government is supporting economic growth and fiscal stability, as well as strengthening sustainable growth through various reforms. And in addition to that, enhancing service delivery, and finally promoting growth through infrastructure investment. The MTBPS continues the tax policies introduced in the 2024 budget. Of course, as honourable members may be aware, but I should make the point because this is a new parliament, but we've made it on numerous occasions in the 6th Parliament. The MTBPS is not designed to introduce new tax measures. Those are for the February budget. But in any event, those tax measures that are re-emphasized focus on equity, efficiency, and protecting the tax base. It's also important to reflect on the purpose of the MTBPS, which of course was introduced in 1999, but has been formalized in the Money Bills Procedure and Related Matters Act. The requirements for tabling the MTBPS are outlined in Section 6. and we have sought to comply with every element of Section 6 of what is required in terms of an MTBPS. We do subject ourselves also to audit, including an internal audit function here at the Treasury. And up to now, we have fully complied with the requirements, and the audits have confirmed that. This slide seeks to remind honorable members of what we said last week in respect of the economic outlook, the real GDP growth outlook, both in the near term and over the MTEF, including as it relates to the different issues that have affected the growth outlook in the current year. However, as we indicated, we consider that over the MTF, there is some cause for cautious optimism, and we think that we are going to see some improvements in that regard. We did note, and we will touch on the subject, and we do have a slide on this in the annex, that there were some questions about National Treasury's projections, both historically and over the medium term. We have indicated both to Parliament and to other forums that we do have a comparison of National Treasury's forecast, both against other forecasters, both in the private sector and in the public sector, as well as against the actual outcomes. And we show, and I want to make this point quite clearly, and we have evidence in this regard, that at least since 2020, National Treasury's projections have been as good, if not better than, a majority of the forecasts, including private sector forecasters such as banks and other analysts, in projecting what growth actually ends up being. So if you look at the numbers in the previous years in this table, such as 2021, 2022, 2023, which are the actuals, we actually have been quite close to that, and in many cases, closer than other forecasters. So often, a lot of the reflections in this relate to numbers that predate the COVID period. But we're quite comfortable that since the COVID period, we've been actually quite strong in our forecasting and have been very close to what the actual outcomes have been, and indeed have been better than other forecasters, including in the private sector. It is important to indicate that we consider that there is room for upside surprises in the growth outlook of South Africa. So even though the growth numbers that you see and that were presented by the minister last week are not necessarily impressive, part of the reason for this is that they do not yet incorporate what could be a potentially impactful growth agenda in respect of what government is currently implementing. And what I mean by that is simply this. These elements of the growth strategy that are listed here could still go into the numbers and therefore lift growth by a significant margin. And so we think what we've done is we've taken a fairly, I would say, prudent and conservative approach by putting before Parliament and the country a set of numbers that don't yet incorporate what could be a potentially significant improvement because of the strategy that is currently underway. And the reason we haven't done that is because I think it's prudent for us to say, let's see the outcomes of these and then begin to consider how they affect the outlook over the medium term in a more consistent fashion. And that is something, of course, that we will provide an update on during the February budget in 2025. But essentially, that growth strategy is driven by 4 pillars, and they are listed here in this slide. And they very importantly include ensuring that we have stability in our macroeconomic framework, ensuring that structural reforms are appropriately and consistently implemented, building state capability and capacity, and finally, supporting growth-enhancing public infrastructure investment. And as members will have seen and stakeholders will have seen, we introduced a new chapter in the MTBPS this year, Chapter 5, which talks to our plans for public sector investment. There were some comments made about the medium-term development plan. The medium-term development plan is a successor to the medium-term strategic framework, which has been there since 2009. There is no legal requirement that the MTSF be somehow tabled along with the MTBPS. However, the growth elements that were outlined in the MTBPS are part of the MTDP, which is essentially a cabinet plan that is currently being finalized through the cabinet processes. And we thought that it's important to make that point in regard to these four strategic pillars. There were a number of issues raised, whether it's by the Parliamentary Budget Office or various other private or individual stakeholders about the macroeconomic strategy. Honorable Chair and honorable members, we consider that macroeconomic stability and growth-enhancing reforms are vital preconditions for job creation and growth. If you don't have stability in your macroeconomic system, if you have an unsustainable fiscal outlook, you're not going to create jobs and you're not going to grow the economy. And we illustrate that in part by showing how growth has correlated very closely over many years and decades with employment. There have been times, of course, in the recent years where we have seen the unemployment rate continue to deteriorate at the same time that we saw a recovery in GDP growth. But that's been a fairly unique experience, and it is related to the recovery from COVID. After 2020, in 2021, we saw a rebound, which was really nothing more than just a rebound from a low base in 2021. But in general, there is a strong correlation between growth and employment, and we need to recognize that as part of our management of macroeconomic policy. This includes thinking about the fiscus and fiscal imbalances. Chair, our view in looking at the history and at the numbers is that the fiscal imbalances that emerged from 2008-9 onwards are a binding constraint to growth. And failure to address them will not put us in a good place. And in this regard, various questions were asked about the focus on deficits and debt, about what this means for South Africa's borrowing strategy. Some of stakeholders seem to suggest that we can continue spending and continue borrowing, and that this by itself is not a problem, and that we need to just focus exclusively on other issues. Our view is that we need to focus on both growth and the fiscal imbalances. We can't ignore one or the other. If you look at this slide, we've shown a slide like this on numerous occasions in the past. Government debt accumulates when the annual deficit is posted on a consistent basis. And what's happened in South Africa is that government has been spending more than it's been taking in as revenue for a very long time. And these deficits have been the main reason why we now have a total debt that is now exceeding, as per the end of last year's numbers, 5.2 trillion rands. The cumulative effect of these deficits and the debt leads to higher debt service costs, which of course extracts from the amount that is available for funding service delivery, but equally importantly, also increases perceptions of South Africa as a risky investment by investors. A risk premium is considered by investors when deciding whether or not to invest in an economy, and the costs that that country must bear when it decides to borrow. And in the case of South Africa, South Africa's credit risk premium has increased compared to other emerging markets. And it has increased as the debt has increased. And therefore, it has not only made debt expensive, but it has made perceptions of South Africa's riskiness higher. And this is something that we have to pay attention to, and we do pay attention to in putting together both the debt management strategy as well as the fiscal framework. Indeed, Section 5 of the Money Bills Procedure and Related Matters Act requires that when considering the fiscal framework, there must be a balance between the expenditure and the debt. And so in the spirit, as well as in following the letter of the law, we work to achieve that balance using the data that is available, including such data as the one that I'm presenting to you here. Turning to the economic reform program of government, as indicated in the MTBPS, we consider that what is very important is we need to lift the levels of investment in the economy. And we need to do that in order to lift economic growth and create jobs. Now, Operation Vulindlela is one, but not the whole economic growth agenda of government, but it is a very key part of the agenda. And Operation Vulindlela, as has been published, has achieved great success, particularly phase 1, and phase 2, which I'll speak to in a moment, is commencing. And in the slide, we show examples of the successes, of Operation Vulindlela phase 1 and the progress that has been made, including the number of reforms that have been completed or remain on track in terms of the timelines that we've set for ourselves. The overwhelming majority of reforms are on track. Of course, reforms take time to happen. And so sometimes what happens is a number of stakeholders will engage with us bilaterally or with Parliament or in other spaces about why things are not happening quicker. The nature of these things is that some of them do take time. But what we have to focus on is whether or not we are on track with the reforms themselves. And honorable members and honorable chair, it is quite clear if you look at the data that overwhelmingly we are on track. And it is only, in our view, a matter of time that these reforms begin to find their way into the numbers, both in terms of growth and job creation in this economy. In addition to that, we are, of course, looking at how both the first phase of Operation Vulindlela and the second phase of Operation Vulindlela are achieving certain results. We have seen results in respect of load shedding being alleviated, as indicated in the MTBPS. We now have gone more than 200 days without load shedding, and this is a direct result of the work that's been done through Operation Vulindlela. The reform agenda, even beyond OV, focuses on supporting strategic state-owned enterprises and repositioning them by strengthening their balance sheet and enabling higher levels of private investment in infrastructure and improving their operational performance. This is an issue that was raised by some stakeholders, including, in particular, I've noted here, COSATU raised this issue, as well as a number of members of the joint committees. And this is a key part of the strategy. It's also important to indicate that part of the reforms, including the upcoming reforms, will focus on addressing the deteriorating performance of local government, as well as the spatial inequalities in South Africa. And we hope that in February, we'll be able to give a more detailed outline of the progress as that progress continues to be underway. Indeed, over the last half a year, there has been a process to identify the specific outputs and priorities for phase 2 of Operation Vulindlela, in line with the focus on things like local government and spatial inequality. And that work is being finalized. On the issue of a capable state, we consider that a capable state will create an enabling environment for higher growth and effective service delivery. And in that regard, we have been working together with the presidency and other stakeholders within government on a variety of reforms. These include improving service delivery and advancing digital government, which is a subject that has been discussed on at least 2 of the cabinet meetings that have taken place since the Government of National Unity was formed in great detail by the lead departments. They include digitizing and simplifying application and disbursement of social grants, including through mobile technology, broadening access to employment pathways, rolling out digital IDs, and building a centralized and accessible website for all government services that can be accessed. We consider that various incentives that we announced last week, such as incentivizing early retirement for some of our older public servants, will advance the rejuvenation of the public service. The early retirement is not about getting rid of people primarily. It's about rejuvenating the public service by creating an opportunity for younger skills to come in, while at the same time giving an opportunity for our older public servants to be able to retire, which is something that they want to do, but to do so without the penalties that they would otherwise face. There is an agenda for active labor market policies, including to ensure that we develop jobs and skills development programs that are more streamlined and effective than what we currently have, which is a cacophony of programs spread across government that need to be sort of aligned. Turning to the issue of revenue, as indicated at the beginning, a number of the statements and questions that were asked during the public hearings were around the issue of tax policy. The 2024 MTBPS maintains the direction that was outlined in the budget in February. Over the last 4 years, we have taken a view that the tax base needs to be protected, because the key issues, of course, we need to raise funding for government, but in addition to that, we need to make sure that we promote equity, efficiency, certainty, and simplicity in the tax system, so that we don't bog the tax system down with things that make it difficult to raise funding. As honorable members will be aware, the global minimum tax bill has been tabled. We are in the middle of a review of tax incentives following advice from the Davis Tax Committee. There are measures that have been reformed, including tax incentives for research and development to improve efficiency and potential outcomes. And other incentives are also being reviewed on an ongoing basis. Of course, we highlighted this and various stakeholders have indicated their interest in this as well. Let me also point out, Honorable Chair, that we receive proposals and we engage directly with stakeholders, including some of them who are here outside of these meetings. So I think it's important for honorable members to know that we actually are having conversations with a number of people on their ideas on this. This is a list of proposals that we are currently engaging with from various stakeholders. I won't go through each of them for the sake of time, but it's just to indicate to honorable members that we actually have a very clear and a very detailed running list of items that we are working together with SARS, with these stakeholders on an ongoing basis in respect of tax proposals. Let me turn to a couple of issues. My colleagues will come in and the Q&A, but because I don't have time, I have to be quick. And so I ask the indulgence of or rather the understanding of both the committees and the stakeholders in that regard. There were various statements that were made. First, let me address a statement that was made during the public hearings, which was a statement to the effect that there's no credible evidence that the employment tax incentive has led to new jobs and continuation undermines evidence-based policy making. This statement is a statement that I'm repeating that was made by one of the stakeholders on Wednesday. Our response is as follows. There have been reviews done of the employment tax incentive, including through NEDLEC, as well as other independent research has been done in this regard. We have shared the findings of these reviews, and they've also been shared by other stakeholders with the committees in the 6th Parliament, as well as in previous administrations. We shared this information. NEDLEC partners agreed that the incentives should be extended, and the previous committees in the previous Parliament, the 6th Parliament that of course ended at the time of the election, agreed with the NEDLEC partners that the incentive be extended. Thirdly, research has been mixed. Further research has been mixed in this regard. So I think the position here is more nuanced than I think what the gentleman was stating. And I think in that regard, we believe that more work does need to be done, because we think that actually it's more mixed and more nuanced than what was presented. Secondly, there was a comment in respect of the tax policy area during the hearings that we should use the G20 presidency to lead international tax reform efforts and push for measures that curb profit shifting by multinationals. Our response in this regard is that South Africa will continue to engage in international tax forums, seeking to promote revenue mobilization and maintain stability in the international tax system. Finally, there was a statement or concerns that were raised around the cost, inequality effects, and unintended consequences of the renewable energy tax incentive that was announced in the 2023 budget. The incentive for individuals lapsed, honorable members, in February 2024, and the incentive for companies is going to lapse in February 2025. Of course, given the fact that these incentives have either only recently lapsed or still to lapse, we will provide appropriate feedback, including updated cost estimates when the data becomes available from SARS to respond to this concern. Turning now to the medium-term fiscal strategy. Chair, I'm not going to go through all of these because there were various statements that were made. And the statements around the fiscal strategy, a number of them were critical. A number of them asked questions about why we're doing certain things. We have sought to explain the fiscal strategy. In Chapter 3 of the MTBPS, we provide a very detailed outline of why the fiscal strategy is what it is. Indeed, in Chapter 1, we also introduce a summary of the fiscal strategy. It is important, given that I don't have time to go through each of these bullets, it's important, honorable members, to recognize that we adopted the current strategy in the wake of the crisis around COVID and the fiscal challenge that we faced. We were on the verge of a fiscal crisis in 2020. So in looking at the data, and we continue looking at it, and including the historical data, let me just say in simple terms, we do not agree with those who say that we were not on the verge of a fiscal crisis. We were. And we had to take very significant steps. And that was not just our opinion, it was the opinion of a variety of stakeholders, commentators, credit ratings agencies, international organizations around the world. They published documents in this regard. They can be read on their websites and our websites. And the fiscal strategy is around achieving the different components of fiscal sustainability, including stabilizing debt, supporting the economy, and ensuring that we protect the critical social services within our very significant fiscal constraints. And at the same time, we need to address the fact that we face very big risks with contingent liabilities that are the best part of R1 trillion that emanate for the most part from state-owned enterprises and their weak financial position. That is even before we talk about other problems that we face, such as in local government, where the majority of municipalities face significant financial challenges. It's not possible when you face such dramatic fiscal constraints to put together a fiscal strategy that does not address the sustainability of the debt outlook, that does not address the need to achieve economic growth. And that is what we have sought to do with this fiscal framework that was tabled last week. As indicated in Chapter 1, and as we've tried to explain in respect of how we think about fiscal sustainability for growth and service delivery, budgeting involves choices. Budgets don't create money. Budgets are evidence that you don't have enough money, and therefore you have to engage in trade-offs. When government puts together a budget, in the short term, it has to choose between specific things, whether it increases taxes in order to spend more money, and therefore, in other words, increase the tax burden. But if you're going to increase taxes, you have to do very good work in assessing whether or not, A, that decision is actually going to give you the money. No point in saying you're going to raise tax rates and then you end up without the money. The money must come in. Secondly, what the impact of that tax decision is going to be on the broader economy. I've yet to meet anybody who doesn't try to structure their financial affairs in such a way that they avoid paying more tax. In other words, people change their behavior because of a tax decision. So we've got to study a tax proposal very, very carefully. The second choice that government has when it faces limited resources is how to look at spending and whether or not spending needs to be cut. In this regard, honorable members, the MTBPS that was tabled last week by the minister does not propose new spending cuts over and above what had previously been proposed. So in terms of what we have in the MTBPS in 2024 that was tabled last week.
5 minutes left, Mr. Sishi.
Okay.
5 minutes left.
We have taken that step. Finally, government can decide to continue spending without increasing the tax burden. And if it does that, the outcome, of course, is that we must borrow more. So I think those choices, in our view, need to be a key issue. Chair, as indicated to you, we've only been given 40 minutes to address 2 days worth of questions. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to finish all of these because there's a lot of slides in this regard. We talk about financing and our debt management strategy in detail here and in other places. There have been questions about the debt outlook. Despite the difficulties that we face, we're still on course to stabilize debt next year as a percentage of GDP. So we think in that regard, the fiscal framework is credible. Some questions were raised about the public sector wage bill and about the early retirement program. This slide provides specific details about how it's supposed to work. I don't have enough time to go through it, including, of course, how we think about wage negotiations in the budget process. Some points were made about state-owned companies. This slide outlines what we're doing in that regard. There were various statements about the infrastructure issues and how we promote growth. One key issue, of course, is that we maintain our focus on the public sector infrastructure program as a key pillar for growth, including the public sector infrastructure spend that was indicated in the 2024 budget review, estimated at 943.8 billion rands over the next 3 years. This includes upscaling PPPs. There were questions about, including from the Parliamentary Budget Office, about PPPs and what we're doing in that regard. They are listed in the slide. I don't have time to go through it. There were questions about local government. The slide outlines what we're doing in that regard, including in respect of supporting municipal.
Mr. Sishi, I think we'll also allow you, we'll give you another 10 minutes so that you cannot rush on responding, because honorable members, they have interest on your responses. So we'll also give you another 10 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I appreciate that very much. So yeah, this slide outlines the support that we give, and it's both in respect of supporting service delivery as well as the financial improvement of municipalities. Of course, we make the point, honorable members, honorable chair, that the challenge here is that municipalities are, of course, a separate sphere of government constitutionally, with the relevant constitutional powers, etc. So, of course, we can support municipalities, and we spend a lot of resources and money to support municipalities, as you can see in the budget of Vote 8, which is the National Treasury. But we can't make municipalities do things. The leadership of municipalities, including the political leadership, the councils and so forth, are the ones that lead the municipality. And in that regard, they have to take those steps. Of course, there are intervention measures, both in the law and in the constitution. And to the extent that, cabinet supports it, we take those measures, and we've spoken to them in the past. There were questions about the national health insurance. Is anything funded in that regard? I think there's two things that are important in respect of the national health insurance. The NHI Act is quite clear that a public entity must be created. It's also quite clear that there must be a consolidation and coordination of funds that currently sit in provinces. So there's more to the NHI than just talking about adding money. Indeed, it's actually about coordinating the existing public sector health function more than anything else. And those processes will take time. With that as a background, we do have an indirect grant for the NHI that is in the baseline, and a direct NHI grant over the MTF to strengthen the public healthcare system in preparation for the NHI. There are also other elements to NHI, which is that it's not just about NHI as a concept, it's about the public sector health system, which includes revitalizing the health facilities themselves from an infrastructure perspective. And we have got details in the slide in that regard. There were questions about the health budgets. There were statements to the effect that health budgets are not growing, etc. I do think it's important to say that from our perspective, it's not just about looking at growth rates. It's about looking at what is the performance of each rand that's actually being allocated. What's actually happening to the money that's there already is actually more important than just simply talking about growth rates. That being said, the projections in the MTBPS are that health budgets do grow over the MTF in nominal terms. But again, what happens to the money that's already there is in many ways more important. And in that regard, there are spending reviews that have been undertaken in respect of the health system, and information in that regard can be provided. There were statements or questions around the SRD grant, which is formerly known as the COVID-19 Social Relief of Distress Grant. It is important to indicate that the cost of the grant is a certain amount of money. And when thinking about what to do about the grant, we've got to have an understanding of the scenarios of the impact on the fiscus. And in that regard, we have done a calculation that shows the potential for a substantial increase if reforms are not made. And the numbers in this regard, there's serious concerns around affordability. It is also important to understand, as indicated in Chapter 1, that it is not accurate that South Africa somehow lags behind other countries in respect of social security and the social wage. Our assessment, and the assessment provided to us by the World Bank, one example of which is published in Chapter 1, is that South Africa is one of the largest social protection systems in terms of spending as a percentage of GDP of developing countries around the world. And at some points, it's actually, in some years, had the largest social protection system of any developing country in the world. And so these things also need to be taken into account when considering reforms in the way forward. There were some statements about social development expenditure, and this slide outlines some details in that regard, including clearly showing the increases in the social protection expenditure over the next 3 years that are part of the budget. It's also important to point out, honorable members, that the injections into social development have been of such a nature over the last number of years that for the first time, social development expenditure has actually overtaken expenditure on health to become the second largest area of expenditure when we exclude debt, the largest being basic education. On current trends, it will actually overtake basic education over the next number of years. Let me conclude, Honorable Chair, by reiterating a couple of key points. The first is that the National Treasury continues to conduct a transparent budgeting system. We are open to engaging directly with stakeholders, both here and outside of these meetings. And we want to reiterate a message that we always put forward in these presentations when we come to public hearings. We invite stakeholders to engage with us bilaterally. Send us emails, call us, write to us. We invite engagements in this regard. And we will continue working hard to make the budget more accessible. As I said, we have produced the People's Guide, we've produced the Children's Guide, and so forth. And any way that we can do that, or we can make that better, we'll continue to do it. With respect to growth, we have a 4-pillar growth strategy, and this is central to the MTBPS to grow the economy and create jobs. Thirdly, we want to reiterate that the budget is a difficult and careful balancing act. South Africa's accumulated fiscal challenges underscore the need for vigilance and prudence to ensure that debt is sustainable and that the fiscal framework provides sustainable funding for key priorities, including the social wage. And finally, the current fiscal strategy promotes growth and sustainability by ensuring that debt is placed on a sustainable path and debt service costs are brought under control. Secondly, resources are directed towards growth-enhancing and job-creating infrastructure projects. Third, risks from SOEs and public entities, which are significant, do not damage the credibility of the fiscal position. And finally, that we allocate a majority, around 60% of the budget, towards the social wage. Chair, the rest is annexures that I will leave for honorable members to read in their own time. But for the sake of time, I want to thank you for the opportunity and stop here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Sishi, and I like your closing remark when you indicated you remain open to engage directly with the stakeholders and in the bilateral or multilateral discussions. So I think that in itself shows that you are willing to address other issues that the stakeholders might not have chance to raise in the meeting. So I'm going now to allow the stakeholders, the participant that was on the public hearing, 2 minutes each. We'll start with the COSATU. Can we get the COSATU to comment on the, yes.
Sorry, Chair, I see there's a hand from Honorable Molefe.
Okay. Honorable Molefe.
Sorry, Chair, sorry, I thought that we're moving into members' questions.
No,
I'll wait.
not yet, Honorable Member. No, thanks very much. Can we go to the stakeholders first, COSATU?
Morning, Chair, morning, members and colleagues. No, thanks, Chair, and I think we'll do a written submission as well to members of some of the key issues from our side. I think, Chair, I'll consider a couple fold. In the Treasury's response, it speaks about creating 1 million jobs over the next decade. We have an unemployment rate of about 12 million South Africans, Chair. So I think for us, if our target is 1 million, when we have 12 million, that's an absolute disaster. We need to be far more ambitious. Chair, we're a bit worried about areas of silence. We don't hear really much about how we're going to assist Eskom to tackle municipal debt owed to it. Not much really about how we're going to assist Transnet and Metro, which are really the two key logistics institutions to unlock growth. SUE, there's some talk, but we have the post office facing liquidation in a few weeks' time, unless the Treasury's allocation of, what is it, about 3.4 billion rand, if I get the number right, is transferred. And again, there seems to be silence on that front. Treasury speaks to fixing local government, that's great, but we need to expedite those discussions. And there was a bit of silence around in the MTBS about how far are we with regards to infrastructure expenditure, because that's really key to stimulating the economy. Chair, I think also a bit concerned that, yes, one can reduce the wage bill. That's an easy administrative thing for Treasury to do. But it seems government is silent upon what is the consequence. And the wage bill has declined by about 10%, from 35 to 31% of the budget. And government is really silent about what we're seeing, a brain drain of skilled professionals, teachers, nurses, doctors, etc. And that's going to have an impact upon service delivery. But Chair, I think there's some useful things too. We agree with Treasury. Let's have a discussion about how to relate the public employment programs, really make sure we achieve our objectives. We agree with the issue of linking SRD grant recipients to skills and employment opportunities, but we should maintain protection for inflation linked to the food poverty line. We really hope, Chair, just to gallop more about giving resources to SARS to boost tax compliance, the roadmap for enforcing the Public Procurement Act. The next stage of two-part pension reform is also help give relief to workers, to inject in the economy. It would be good, Chair, I think, to have further discussions, including on how can the GFRECA, the reserve account, assist Treasury going forward. Are we confident of meeting the grey listing targets by February? But I think, Chair, one piece of the time constraints are significant. I think we'd want to offer to Treasury and to suggest to Treasury, let's have further discussions as Labour, as business, with Treasury at NEDLAC before the budget, to see what are the areas we can find each other on, especially the high impact interventions, which can really help to grow the economy, fix the state, and tackle unemployment. But I think our fear is that if we just continue to be so unambitious, it means we're accepting the status quo, and that I think would be a disaster for all of us, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Thank Comrade Matthew. The second stakeholder, IEJ, Institute for Economic Justice. 2 minutes
Thanks,
each.
Chair. Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. And we appreciate the response, detailed response by the National Treasury. I think, Chair, generally what we're seeing is an approach that continues to see investment in people and the most marginalized in particular as only a cost, particularly in reference to social grants expenditure and the possible considerations in terms of improving the SRD grant. I think in as much as an exercise has been undertaken to understand the costs on the fiscus, we should also encourage modeling to be undertaken to actually see the long-term macroeconomic impacts of actually providing social transfers to the poor, not only in sustaining livelihoods and alleviating hunger, but also in generating and stimulating economies, particularly local economies. Some of our work has actually shown through modeling that a UBIC that is scaled up can contribute to long-term economic growth. And so I think it is with this lens that we think overall the budget should be viewed, whereby we don't necessarily just assess the cost, but we assess the long-term impact of proposals that have been brought forward by stakeholders. I think we're disappointed that there's no mention of particularly human rights impact assessments on the fiscal strategy that the National Treasury has chosen to pursue since 2012 in terms of cutting expenditure, and currently the continuation, as we see no change as we've submitted And I think such an assessment is important to actually assess what results is the strategy bringing in terms of alleviating unemployment, hunger, and poverty, as well as contributing to growth. I think this is very important, especially given as we are considering gender-responsive budgeting, which we see in the MTBPS was not mentioned, and in this presentation has been relegated to the annexure. I think an approach that we should take going forward is actually looking through the budget and its impact on how it affects different groups of people, including women and children. And so that's the view that we take. And so we're quite disappointed that gender-responsive budgeting doesn't take a prominent role in this response, although we acknowledge that obviously there was limited time in terms of detailing some of the responses from the National Treasury. Lastly, I think when it comes to public employment programs, would also agree that there needs to be more ambition, and the ambition needs to be reflected in resourcing the public employment programs that have actually benefited young people and the majority who are unemployed. I think in making those choices, the National Treasury needs to decide whether it's actually not extending the social grant, and it's also not expanding public employment programs. I think we need to understand where employment will come from, given that we also didn't see a credible job creation strategy put on the table. So yeah, we're quite disappointed that although they said, the Honorable said that the work is underway in terms of expanding public employment programs, I think this is an urgent matter, and it should have been one of the most prioritized issues in this response. I think I'll pause there and leave my colleagues to add on where I've left.
Thank you. And now we go to Public Economic Project, PEP. Yes.
Good morning, chairpersons. My name is Thokozile Madonka. I'm with the Public Economy Project from Wits University. We welcome the Treasury's response, and of course, we would continue our bilateral conversations. I think importantly, Chair, one of the things that we need to foreground, which unfortunately Treasury did not do so in their presentation explicitly, is to talk about some key metrics around unemployment, inequality, and poverty in South Africa. And so we talk about growth, but in the absence, we can have growth, but we can increase inequality and poverty. And so we need to have a conversation about what kind of lessons has Treasury learned from the structural adjustment programs of the 1980s and the recent fiscal consolidation programs that were implemented in Europe post the 2008 financial crisis, and the impact that that has had on unemployment, inequality, and poverty, which we know disproportionately harms women and poor women and people with disabilities. And so we would really call on Treasury to provide more information about how their growth path is going to actually address these metrics, which unfortunately they did not, unless I missed it in the annexure, talk about how they estimate unemployment and inequality to go down as a result of their policies that incidentally we have to mention they've been implementing since 2012, in which we have not seen growth and we have not seen a lowering of unemployment or inequality or poverty. In fact, we've seen an uptick as well. Secondly, we welcome the conversation about the hard choices that budgets have to make, but it's important for us to question who is being asked to make the choices. So we have decided in a policy format to choose at the expenditure side to cut as opposed to increasing revenue. And yes, Treasury mentioned that we need to make sure that we do so in a responsible manner, and we hope and welcome that they will take on the proposals by ourselves and others that revenue raising needs to be explored in order to deal with both redistributive justice and being able to support and ensuring a capable state. So we look forward to further conversations, and we welcome this platform and welcome the committee's openness to have us respond and to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, PEP. Now goes to AIDC, Alternative Information and Development Center.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you to the Treasury for the responses. I'll just make 3 short points from our side. The first is that we do feel a little disappointed that we still don't, something we don't see reflected is the risks that public-private partnerships do pose in terms of inclusive growth through the transformation of infrastructure into paid services rather than public goods, as well as the fiscal risks that they can bear through, for example, guarantees. And also the effect on state capacity of turning departments into procurement offices, essentially. Secondly, we also in line with the previous speaker, we feel that if the budget is aligned with the developmental priorities in the NDP, then we ought to be at least tracking poverty throughout the NDP period as a key outcome, and that this should be much more central. And thirdly, we also feel a bit maybe confused about the statement on international tax reform on needing to maintain stability in the international tax system, because this seems to be something that's maybe a bit at odds with aiming to secure progressive outcomes for international tax reform, which is a process where South Africa has a lot to gain, given the scale of profit shifting and related kinds of illicit financial flows. So that's also something that we would maybe appreciate a bit of elaboration on. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AIDC. We now go to Dr. Mela. Dr. Mela, I hope you'll also start responding on the request that you on the issue that you have raised in the last public hearing about one official from the FFFC, whereby the chairperson have requested you to make a submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I am going to make a written submission. I haven't had time to put that together yet, but I will submit it to the secretaries by Monday next week, if that's okay. So for the moment, I'm just going to respond to a couple of issues raised by the Treasury in response to points that I made. So I was hoping to share a screen with you, but unfortunately that's not possible. So I'll just talk to these points. The first thing is just to say that the National Treasury's points about information sharing don't really address the concerns that were raised. And the key issue here really is that more information, quantity does not mean quality. And to take a very specific example, which I will move on to now, the employment tax incentive. So here's a question for honorable members. Do you know how much the employment tax incentive is forecast to cost over the medium term? Now, I think you probably don't know that because National Treasury hasn't told you. So providing a children's guide to the budget is great, but it doesn't address the issue, these core kinds of issues. It doesn't provide modeling as to the National Treasury's modeling of why the fiscal consolidation path should stabilize debt at 75% GDP. Okay, so I think we need to be very clear what the issues are. Just a greater quantity of information does not address these substantive issues. And I don't think we should continue along this line. I don't think it's very fruitful. This is the kind of response we get year after year. The point again about bilaterals, I don't think that's really consistent with transparency. It also raises concerns about who do these stakeholders the National Treasury is having bilaterals with? Who do they actually represent? But either way, it doesn't get away from the fundamental point that the Constitution and the Money Bills Act give Parliament the power and Parliament the oversight responsibility. And therefore, Parliament must have this kind of information in order to be able to conduct itself accordingly. So just to get to the employment tax incentive, I can send these slides also through to the members. I have published a paper on this. In that paper, I dissect in great detail the limitations of the evidence that was provided to Parliament in 2018 when it renewed the tax incentive. Furthermore, I don't think it's really correct to say that the other researchers are independent. To my knowledge, almost all the researchers who've found positive evidence in favor of the ETI have either simultaneously or subsequently received funding from initiatives from either the Treasury, the SARS, or the Presidency, who all, of course, have an interest in this matter. So as one of the very few technically qualified independent researchers who's actually published a paper in a top international journal on this issue, as I said in my previous presentation, my professional expert opinion is there's no credible evidence that shows job creation by the ETI. And that means that potentially billions of rands are being squandered every year. Okay, so we really can't divert from that issue. And just to remind members as to why the ETI is really important, first of all, the cost. Second of all, it's a key pillar of the government's employment creation programs. And third of all, it's been signed off up until 2030. So it is a very important issue, and I focus on it both for its own merits, but also because it illustrates a number of other concerns about the oversight process. I'll stop there, Chairperson, due to time. But just to repeat, I will submit that written submission that was requested by the Chairperson in the previous meeting. I will submit that by Monday. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Mena. Hila?
Good morning, Treasury representatives. We appreciate this opportunity to provide our response to the Standing Committee on the potential amendments of the Health Promotion Levy. This is an important discussion and recognize Treasury's commitment to addressing the issues of public health and fiscal sustainability through this policy. As tax amendments are typically made in February, we're hoping that Treasury will consider raising the HPL to 20% with an annual adjustment to account for inflation. We note that Treasury previously signaled an increase in 2025 following the moratorium in 2023 and 2024. This aligns well with the budget's focus on promoting equity and efficiency. And the HPL has been proven to be a valuable tool in advancing equity. Evidence shows that it has a positive impact, particularly among lower income households who are disproportionately affected by non-communicable diseases like diabetes, and have seen the greatest reduction in sugary drink consumption. Furthermore, as government expenditure continues to outpace revenue collection, contributing to the country's growing debt, the HPL provides a sustainable source of revenue. In the first 2 years, it generated nearly 6 billion, demonstrating its potential not only as a public health intervention, but also as a fiscal tool. We believe that the revenue from the HPL could be ring-fenced to fund essentially healthcare initiatives, further amplifying its benefits and contributing to health and well-being of South African communities. On the matter of stakeholder engagement, we recognize Treasury's intervention to involve a diverse range of stakeholders in policy discussions. While we have made several attempts to establish direct contact, we have encountered challenges in connecting. Nonetheless, we remain committed to engaging proactively, and we hope that discussions such as these strengthen our future opportunities for collaboration. Thank you once again for considering our input on these pressing issues. We look forward to continued dialogue and collaboration as we work to share goals for public health and fiscal stability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hila. Amanda Mobi.
Thank you and good morning, Honorable Chair. Firstly, we'd like to thank National Treasury for their responses and considering some of our recommendations. Honorable Chair, I think if the committee could please allow us to respond to National Treasury in writing, but we do have one clarity that I think not just Amanda Mobi, but a lot of people, including members of the public, are seeking, is to find out if National Treasury is planning to terminate the SRD grant in 2025. If they could please respond to that and give us a clear, straight answer, that would be great. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Amanda Mobi. The last one, the Budget Justice Coalition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you, Treasury, for your response to our presentations. So most of the contributions that I had were covered by previous speakers. So, just supporting most of what has been said. But I think, maybe just to emphasize a point on the trade-offs that National Treasury is proposing is that we all understand trade-offs and we all understand how the economy works. But what we're trying to say, maybe there's a disconnect, or for some reason, like Treasury is not really hearing what we're saying, is that trade-offs are one thing, but if those trade-offs are only being done or disproportionately done by the underserved communities, by the impoverished people in this country, it no longer seems that it's trade-offs for the sake of it. It seems that there's a punishment or there's a disproportionate way that this is being done, but it doesn't have to be like that. And this is what our submissions have been saying for years, actually, that it doesn't have to be a scenario where we make trade-offs that result in the poor getting poorer while the rich get richer. And so we really do, again, call on human rights impact assessments, that these are never acknowledged, or that recommendation is not ever acknowledged of what implementing human rights impact assessments, that even if there are budget cuts that are being made, Treasury takes a step forward, or government takes a step forward in thinking, how can we protect the most marginalized people in our country from bearing the greatest burden of this? That, how can we use our position, our fiscal policy, not to worsen inequality in our country? And another example is, again, with gender responsive budgeting, that despite the commitment that Treasury has made, it keeps getting postponed. It keeps getting postponed. And it's the same excuse that's being made on data issues or something like that. But there's no reaching out to the broader broader population, to women's groups, to civil society, to other groups, to say, hey, we're struggling with this, but we really want to create a budget for the people, by the people. We would like to advance a budget that doesn't worsen gender inequalities in this country. And so there's an issue with that. I think that there are some of these there are things that are being said and have been said in this forum for many years, that we are all trying to come together to build a state that is capable of advancing socioeconomic rights and the constitutional obligations of the state. But it's as though that we're not being heard. And I don't think that we're making unfair requests to say that we should be recognizing the impact of budgets or budget decisions on the majority of people in this country. And I think I will just wrap up also to say that the comments about the quality of spend, again, it seems as though we're pitting quantum of spend versus quality of spend, but that's not our position at all. And we've been saying for years that, yes, the quality of spend, underspending in education and health is deeply concerning, because those funds don't actually go to the intended beneficiaries. But just because a budget is being underspent doesn't mean that there isn't a need for those services for those people. It's the people who are being punished for that, and they're not the ones who underspent the budget. And so we've been calling on National Treasury to invest in capacity building for provinces to overcome underspending, or some form of consequence management, or some interventions that show that National Treasury is seeing their role as well as government in actually redressing the chronic underspending issues that the country faces. I think I'm probably running out of time, so I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Budget Justice Coalition. I'm now going to allow the PBO and the FFC to also engage with the National Treasury. Dr. Janji, I don't know who's going to start. Is it you or Dr. Mbabu? Dr. Janji?
Dear Chair, thank you so much.
You're muted, Director.
Go ahead, Siraj. Go ahead, Siraj.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair, for the opportunity to participate. I'm not going to say much. Hopefully it will take 1 or 2 minutes.
I just wanted to raise the issue, especially since this is a new parliament, is that we see the same kind of thing happening every MTBPS and budget at these meetings, is that the Treasury will just repeat what they've been saying and respond to people with points where they just repeat what they've been saying. And there's an unhappiness generally from the participants that have given responses to the MTBPS and budget. And I think a huge part of the problem is the narrowness of the economic perspectives coming out of the National Treasury. And I think Parliament should be imploring the Treasury to take a more pluralist approach to macroeconomics and economics generally. And I think that would allow a more extensive and intensive engagement around these serious issues. An example, for instance, is how we're seeing the public, a lot of people coming and doing the public inputs, talking about what they think is sustainable for the macroeconomy of South Africa. And they point to unemployment, macroeconomic variables like unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And they're basically saying, this is not sustainable. Continuing unemployment at this level, increasing it, even if it came down by 10, 15%, that still is not sustainable. And the National Treasury keeps coming back and saying sustainability is about the size of your deficits, the size of your debt, and they don't actually show a relationship between how they going to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and how this can directly impact and cause growth. For instance, they spoke about the basic income grant as not being affordable, but they don't talk about the impact of all that money being in the pockets of households where children are dying and suffering, where productivity is low, where people can't afford to go out and look for jobs or be economically active. What kind of impact that will have on the economy? In fact, they keep coming with fairly selective studies on how low and below one the fiscal multipliers is in South Africa, without actually engaging with the broader literature and the international literature. And recently, the PEP brought out a really good paper on the positive impacts of infrastructure and social spending on GDP and growth, which seems to be ignored in their views. And so there's a very narrow choice. The same goes for the way they talk about the impact of taxes and the choice not to talk about wealth taxes, but to conflate income tax and inheritance taxes with wealth taxes. And I think there should be a broader discussion. And so, and I think this comes out of this very narrow view of what economics is. And this is a dominant thing within the profession, where people talk about economics as it's one economics, but there are a range of broad ideas. And I think engaging with those, thinking through what works in South Africa, especially a developing economy, works. And I want to end off just with reference to a paper done 10 years or more ago by Stephen Friedman, Professor Stephen Friedman of UJ, where he spoke about, and he criticized this notion that South Africa has very high transparency in our budgeting process. He says a sustained and high level of budget transparency is not due to government's vulnerability to public pressure, but its insulation from it. And then one of the points he also made is that this insulation is linked to this notion that they ignore differences and contests between ideas and interests, which is crucial to democracy. So I think we're seeing this happening over and over, and I agree with Professor Friedman's view. We can say we're transparent, we've got the most transparent processes and those kind of things, but I don't think we're actually seeing a real engagement with ideas and also people in the spirit of the kind of democratic forum that this should be. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Mohammed. Dr. Janji?
I was saying thank you so much. We'll stop there.
Okay. No, it's fine. Thanks, Mr. Mohammed. Can I check if Dr. Mbava is here or anyone from FFC? Then if not, I'll go straight to the honorable members. I think I've already noted Honorable Molefe. There's Honorable Molefe, then Honorable Bretz, Honorable Van Rooyen, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Brian, can you start with Honorable Brian? Then I'll also call, as I'll be noting on the screen. Honorable Brian Molefe.
Thank you, Chair, and let me thank the National Treasury for the presentation. What is quite striking about the presentation, and in fact the whole MTBPS process, was that there is very scant reference. In fact, today there was not even a single reference to the NDP and its targets. So I don't know if the NDP has been abandoned or what is now happening at the Treasury. Instead, what is being presented is that OV, Operation Vulindlela, is successful and it is doing very well. But how is OV helping to meet NDP targets, and how does the achievement of OV targets promote NDP targets, especially employment, inequality, and poverty, which are, we all agree, are the most important problems facing South Africa at the moment. The Treasury observes that employment tax incentives do not work and they will lapse. So my question is, so what will replace them? And what is it that works? Is there research that indicates to what actually works to create employment? Because I think our biggest problem in South Africa at the moment is unemployment. The lack of direct interventions through the budget to create unemployment, to fight inequality is actually quite stark. It's quite visible that there are no direct interventions. And what does the Treasury think about what are the interventions that they think that are direct that will affect or positively affect employment creation? And then VETS, the VETS, I can't remember who exactly had VETS, but I remember it was a presentation from VETS that talked about the wealth tax. Even today in the response by the National Treasury, that in the tax proposals, that was ignored. It was not talked about, but we picked up the wealth tax and would like to know what the Treasury's thinking is concerning about the wealth tax. And then the Treasury says that there is a new agenda on jobs and skills is required. And what is this new agenda? What is the process of getting to this agenda? If anything, I mean, it points to the fact that there has been a spectacular failure on the creation of jobs and skills. So can we get the details of what these failures were and how the failures happened? And how will the Treasury go about pursuing this new agenda? Because we do not think that that new agenda is should be based on the privatization of state-owned entities. And then on debt, part of the reason that our debt service costs are high is because we as a country are now in junk status, which has pushed up our debt costs, borrowing costs. So part of resolving the problem of the debt service cost must include a plan to go back to the investment grade that we used to enjoy in the late 90s and in the early 2000s. And does the Treasury have a plan to improve our investment grade ratings? And this strategy should be very easy to develop because the investment rating agency investment rating agencies tell you exactly what their problems are with your ratings and things that need to be fixed for them to reconsider upgrading you. So I do not hear improving investment ratings to investment grade as a strategy to reduce borrowing costs. And then the borrowing is in the traditional US and the European markets, have we explored, the Treasury explored other debt markets like Sukuk, bilateral debt agreements with countries like China, maybe even Russia, at lower interest rates to try and reduce the debt service costs and the cost of borrowing? And does the Treasury have a debt risk management strategy? And what does the debt risk management strategy say is the biggest risk to our debt? What is the biggest risk and how can it be mitigated? Because if we understood what the outcomes of a risk management strategy development, debt risk management strategy development are, we would be in a position to see exactly what the problem is with the debt and how to reduce it. And then I would like the Treasury to talk a little bit about the REIPP contingent liabilities, the contingent liabilities coming out of the renewable projects. These contingent liabilities have risen quite spectacularly over the last couple of years. I think in the last year, they increased by about 70 billion. But what is reported in the statement of contingent liabilities as REIPP contingent liabilities is in fact just the current liabilities as they relate to this year. But these are 20-year contracts. And so where is the full picture of what these contingent liabilities are? Because we estimate that they could go up to 900 billion, close to 1 trillion over a 20-year period. So what is the real risk of these contingent liabilities? And I know that when rating agencies look at the rating of a country, they also look at the contingent disaster that is in the contingent liabilities, or the imminent disaster that is in the contingent liabilities. And a reduction of contingent liabilities would also contribute to improving our ratings. Does the Treasury think like that? What is their plan around that? And then infrastructure spending by SOEs. I mean, there is a sort of a refrain from the Treasury that this will be done by the private sector. This will be done by getting the infrastructure to getting the private sector to participate more. But what is the plan? What is the plan on infrastructure spending by the SOEs? What are the amounts? What is the medium term? Other than saying that it is going to be done by the private sector, I mean, beyond being done by the private sector, what are the amounts that are involved, where and how? Thank you, Chair. I think those are my questions for now.
Thanks, Honorable Molefe. Can we go to Honorable Brett as we also continue reading on the chat? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and good morning, all the colleagues. From my side, I'm going to limit myself to 3 issues in order to be time conscious. Firstly, I got the impression that there is public expectation, and even from corners that one would expect to be informed, that the MTBPS is an opportunity for the Minister and Treasury to introduce new funds into the budget. And maybe Treasury can assist to emphasize the goal and function of the MTBPS and clarify general misconception in this regard. Secondly, this week, Bloomberg reported that according to Fitch, South Africa's debt will only peak in 2027 on 76.9% of GDP. Fitch does not agree with the MTBPS prediction of 75.5% in 2026. The view of Fitch, of course, influences our credit rating. I want to inquire from Treasury their views on how this committee can assist in achieving the predicted 75.5% in 2026. And lastly, Dr. Miller made interesting proposals, and I just want to request that Dr. Miller, if he can please present his published research paper to this committee. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Brett. Honorable Van Rooyen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, without any waste of time, I think to a large extent, I've been covered by some of the submissions made by Honorable Molefe. But the first point that I wanted to check, Chair, because the way you started this meeting, you just dealt with opening and welcome. You didn't touch on apologies and all that. So I'm not sure if was it a compulsory or a discretional for the executive not to be part of this meeting. But also I didn't hear clearly what is the reason for the DG not to be part of this meeting. I hear the presenter from National Treasury tendering an apology without appropriate details. So maybe you can just clarify, Chair, the status of their attendance into this meeting. And then secondly, you know, Treasury response to the absence of the MTBPS reinforces the perceptions that is dominant in the place on its disposition as a ministry that can willy-nilly change the rules of the game. I mean, if you look at the chronology of budget processes, it's expected of the cabinet to present the plan, to table the plan to Parliament. And that's the plan that is guiding the policy statement as a preparation for the budget announcement next year. So in the absence of such, we just heard from National Treasury that they have engaged with the executive. That simply suggests that they're deviating from the norm of ensuring that the plan is there before. So I'm not sure exactly, Chair, because from an oversight point of view, this might pose a serious challenge to us. That's why even the submission made by VETS carries more weight to say, but what informed these projections? What is it that you are going to do differently to make sure that unemployment is dealt with, to make sure that inequality is dealt with, to make sure that poverty is dealt with? Which metrics did you use? So it's compounded by the matter that we are entertaining the budget policy statement that is not even informed by the existence of a development plan as guided by the National Development Plan. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Van Rooyen. I think on the issue of the apologies, the mistake is on my side, and I apologize and reserve it. And I think I thought this was a continuation, but safe to say, honorable members, whoever has got an apology can respectfully submit it to the Secretariat, and also the National Treasury can also do that, but they will respond to that why the DG is not here, including the executive. Can now go to the Honorable Rider.
Yes, good morning, Chairperson. That is very much for the opportunity. I have a couple of issues I'd like to raise. Number one, Mr. C went into some depth the transparency of the budget, and I do think that we do need to acknowledge that Treasury has come a very long way in terms of its transparency levels. And as she said, the connection's unstable. I've just turned my video off. Chairperson, so the transparency has been lauded internationally, etc. However, you know, just because you're winning a race doesn't mean you should slow down. You should be competing against yourself and improving yourself and your own business as well. So I do think that the calls for modeling in certain instances are not only appropriate, but that it's imperative that we get some of this information. And I do think that enabling MPs to come in with informed decisions is important. Now, you know, I understand that the children's guide to the budget may have been developed for MPs as well. But you know, we do like to engage with some of the deeper thought processes that go into the into what comes in as our final fiscal policy in the longer term. So I do think that I want to re-emphasize the fact that as much information and more information is in fact encouraged, because what we're taking decisions on. Since I opened the door for the Children's Guide, Chair, I do think that it's important for us to say that it would be very useful for us as MPs to receive such documents. Give us a link, give us something that we can distribute. We are, after all, the interface between Treasury, between government and the people out there as politicians. We have a role as MPs. If you can supply us with such excellent information for us to distribute, it helps us build our brand as well. But I do think that it's important for us to be out there empowering our communities and therefore enriching the inputs into these processes, so that we don't get a continuous parade of exactly the same people coming through and giving us public inputs. It's wonderful. We had a scholar presenting to this committee based on their interactions with the budget, and I think that needs to be encouraged. So help us to help you. If you do something, don't hide your light under a bush. Let's get it out there. Chair, I do want to also talk about the fact that the slides came extremely late for us to process, and 46 slides in 40 minutes doesn't give justice to the content. Is so late, I do think is difficult. And I do think that the time allowed for processing the MTBPS is something that was raised in the discussions. But I'd love to hear Treasury's comments as well. I think that the timelines are too tight, and it is certainly something that we need to look at. I do think Treasury's done well separating the issues out that relate to the MTBPS and other issues where it's from the discussions into things that will be discussed in the coming weeks in different fora. So I just wanted to mention that. Chair, I do think that local government has not been given sufficient time in the responses. I note what Mr. Sishi said about this is a different sphere of government. However, Chairperson, I do think that local government is going to be the thing that cripples us as government. Has the potential to bring all three spheres down if local government fails. It's very far down the track towards failure in its current format, and I do think that more time needs to be given. I am again reiterating, I'm very pleased that Treasury has reopened the door to thinking around Eskom debt and so on. I note Eskom taking a very hard line on Johannesburg again. Obviously, I understand they need to protect their income streams as well as their cash flows, but I do think that we are finding ourselves in a situation where even the biggest municipalities are really struggling to manage their finances. We need to talk about this at length. Chair, I also want to just address unfair criticism towards Treasury. I think that we need to take cognizance of the Treasury inputs that have come through the public participation process and implemented them. I mean, for heaven's sake, we had the raid on GFECRA that came through this format and ended up becoming or being implemented. So I don't think one can rail against the fact that Treasury just comes here and repeats the original arguments. I think Treasury should be commended for taking some of the inputs on board. The last thing, Chair, is not about the medium-term development plan. As much as it would be a very useful thing to bring into these discussions, I do also believe that we must take into account the fact that we are in a new government. There are a number of partners involved now, and it would be disingenuous for them to just put forward something that is a rehash of old thinking. So I to give time for the thoughts to be put together from different perspectives. The comment was made the other day. We can't be repeating our actions without any change and expecting a different outcome. So let's give this appropriate time. We're all looking forward to the MTDP, but you know, do you want it fast or do you want it right? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Siwisa.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to everyone. Chair, I'm going to keep my video of network of Acacia Park. Chairperson, I'm not going to dwell on other issues that other members have already alluded on, but I'm going to focus only on one, which is one of the comments that was made. And I think even all of the we all agree on one thing, that the debt of South Africa is very high. And National Treasury has also alluded to that to say that the debt is more than the revenue that is coming in, which is of a great concern. Because if we are at that stage, it means that we have less money for service delivery, we've got less money for job creations. It means that if unemployment rate is very high, then there's no growth in the economy. And then it means that we don't have enough people that are going to contribute towards the GDP. And I was expecting National Treasury, because we are speaking about people that are giving money, to come up with solutions as to say, this is what we are going to do for job creations. This time and era when our debt is very high and we still speak about having to make loans. We should be speaking about, we've got so many people that are employed. We've created so many jobs for revenue, to have an increase in revenue. This is what we are going to do to get the debt down. But if the revenue is very low, it means that we are still going to keep on making loans. We are still going to keep on finding ourselves in paying interest on loans that we are making, which is not assisting anywhere. And it is of a great concern when we speak about the public-private partnership, because of now we are saying that the state is failing to maintain itself. We need the private sector to come and rescue. And this is something that I've also alluded in the Fiscal meeting, when the Minister of Finance was in a meeting to give us a briefing about the medium-term budget, to say that we are at a point whereby the state says that it can't rescue itself. We need the private sector to come and rescue the state. And we can't find ourselves there. We need National Treasury, even the Department of Finance, needs to come up with plans of job creations. We are not speaking about EPWP, not about internship. We mean real jobs whereby people are going to get enough salaries for them to be able to pay taxes, for South Africa to be able to survive. At this point, National Treasury needs to tell us what are their plans to make sure that there are job creations that are happening. Industrialization is one of the key issues that we need to look into. Because if you look out there, Chair, and I think this is something that we also debated in the NCOP on, I think it's on Tuesday, to say that most of the industrial sites are being closed down. We don't have enough industrial sites for employment. And that's where in the past, South Africans got most of their employment. But nowadays, most people are sitting at home. Government is spending more money on issuing of grants, whereas people should be taught. We can't keep on giving people fish. We need to teach people how to fish their own fish in the rivers and in the sea. At this moment, South Africa is failing. The government is failing. National Treasury is failing to address the issue of unemployment, is failing to address the issue of how we stop ourselves from actually going out there and looking for loans. How do we stop the issue of bringing the private sector into the space of government? Because I fear that we'll find ourselves at the mercy of the private sector coming to dictate to government to say, this is what you need to do. If you want money, this is what you need to do. If we go to international bodies like your IMF to give us money, they are going to come with terms and conditions. Anybody that gives you money comes with terms and conditions to say, I give you the money, these are the terms and conditions. Are we really prepared as South Africa at the stage where we are to find ourselves in a situation whereby we might find ourselves in a situation whereby the private sector is going to dictate even to us members of parliament to say, this is how we are going to utilize this money. If you don't agree to the terms and conditions, then it means that I can't give you my money because this is what I want to. This is how I want you to spend, irrespective of where we know that we need the money the most. Infrastructure is in tatters all over, all sectors, all departments in government. Schools are not there, hospitals are not there. Housing backlog is very high. The roads are in tatters. Everything is just a mess. And National Treasury to boldly say that we are not making enough money, but we've got more debt than what we can actually take as the revenue. I can also agree to the issue of local government. Local government is going to cause the collapse of government because not enough is done to rescue local government. Not enough monitoring and evaluation is done in our local municipalities. Not enough efforts are put into assisting municipalities. And if local government fails, because everything we can sit at national, but if local government is going to collapse, if things are not done properly locally, then it means that we'll just come to parliament and try to approve things that we don't know, that we know that they are not going to be conducive for South Africa. We are just going to sit here and listen to presentations of medium-term budgets, which we know that they are not benefiting South Africans. So National Treasury should have come with a plan to say, this is how we are going to create jobs. This is how we are going to rescue municipalities. Whatever that has been presented is not enough. Chairperson, more needs to be done by National Treasury. They are the controllers of funds in South Africa. They know, they must listen to what people are saying. Contributions have been made. They should have listened to what the stakeholders have said to say, this is where the loopholes are, this is where you need to do better. And I'm hoping that next time when we go through the same process, we are going to be told that the revenue is more than the debt that we are in as South Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Siwisa. Honorable Bateman.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all of my honourable colleagues and everyone on the call. And thank you firstly to Mr. Sishi for what I thought was an excellent presentation, a credible presentation, and the emphasis on growth as a route to dealing with unemployment. I thought also your comments on the fact that the growth forecasts were prudent and didn't take into account the reforms that are being promoted. I thought that was a good observation, and also gives us hope that this actually forms a platform for actually outperforming as we make the necessary changes in the economy and in the structure of the economy that are going to create that platform for growth. Also mentioning just a focus on dealing with the deficit, dealing with the debt, your re-emphasis of the fact that the debt was a massive challenge facing our country and still needs to be addressed and taken seriously. The re-emphasis on the debt anchor and bringing bailouts to an end as well. And then also your mentioning of the need for a real thorough review of spending. That's not just about what the percentages are, but it's actually how the money is being spent, the focus on infrastructure. So many elements in this budget that I think are very praiseworthy. Some of the people on the call today and also in the previous sessions that we had today spoke about our high interest rates. And I do think that we need to point out that the high interest rates that we face are a feature of firstly having and tolerating a level of inflation of between 3 and 6%, plus also the risk premium that's attached to South Africa, and that risk premium in a large part was caused by the deficit spending between 2008 and 2018, and we know who was responsible for that, and also the bailouts for Transnet and Eskom and other state-owned enterprises, and we also know who was responsible for that. And I don't think there's any dodging some of the blame for why we have so much debt and why we have such high interest rates on that debt, because of the risk premium attached to it. But I think there's a flip side to that, which is that as we begin to address the debt, we can look forward to the risk premium attached to South Africa actually coming down. And we can look forward to our interest rates potentially coming down as well, particularly also because of the interest rate cycle at the moment tends to be moving towards lower interest rates. And if we put that together with outperformance on the economic growth front, given that Treasury has said that the growth forecasts are prudent and conservative, I think there's good reason for hoping that we might be able to bring debt down quicker, bring interest rates and costs of debt down quicker, and see outperformance on the tax revenue side through economic growth. But what Treasury has done is they've actually, I think, provided a prudent, conservative, foundational type budget that focuses on getting the right things right for the sake of growth in the future. And I think to this point, a number of the speakers have said that, why are we not doing more about solving unemployment? Unfortunately, finance officers, and I used to be a finance director myself in times gone by, we tend to be prudent and conservative, but also one has to emphasize that government is not the job creator. Government creates the environment in which the private sector can create jobs. That's the only way we can really create sustainable jobs for the economy. And in this regard, some of the participants have been calling for higher tax rates. And I think we need to say that increasing taxes generally is actually something that retards economic growth. And if anything, high tax rates has been one of the main causes of the unemployment that we face, because we've tried to put the state as the center of the solutions to all of the problems. We've actually crowded out the private sector. We've retarded the growth of the private sector, and we've actually retarded the rate at which we're able to create jobs in our economy. So I think we're looking in the wrong direction if we're thinking the answer is to increase the size of the state and increase tax rates. We might, of course, and always should look and make sure that tax rates are fair and that loopholes in taxes and so on are addressed. But overall, to be thinking, we just need to increase taxes is a very short-sighted view, because as Mr. Sishi pointed out, the decisions we make around taxes have an effect on the behavior of economic participants. And to put it in short, we have to create an environment in South Africa that attracts capital investment and entrepreneurs, doesn't repel them to other nations. And so that's what nations are doing. They're trying to be competitive so that they can draw in economic investment, direct private sector investment, and stimulate economic growth through that. And if we can grow our primary sectors, grow our secondary sectors through attracting direct private sector investment, that's the key to unlocking the unemployment and the economic growth and so on. A number of people have mentioned local government and the problems that we have in local government. I won't repeat what's said there, but I do agree. And also, I think one of the responses also mentioned the knock-on effect that the disarray in local government finances is having on Eskom and our water boards is a very serious issue. And I would like to see more active interventions from Treasury and more active responses from Treasury on how we address that. And then lastly, obviously, all of these budgets, one of the key things is going to be continuing to contain the growth of the public sector wage bill. And I think that's going to require a lot of discipline and support and strength. And I think we also need to call out the unions who've been pushing for unaffordable wage increases. And they're also part of the cause of us where we are now, with unaffordable public sector wage bill, reducing headcount, pressure on services as a result. And I think we need to say enough is enough. We cannot simply just write out checks for ever increasing wage bills. We need to actually rein in our wage bill and make sure that it's affordable, because the whole country is suffering now a lot because of the debt that's been created. So again, just to summarize, I think a very credible presentation. Mr. Sishi, I would commend you for it, and thank you very much. Thank you, honourable members.
Thank you, Honorable Bateman. And I'll also now go back to National Treasury for the response. Mr. Sishi, I hope you noted the comments and the questions from the members and the stakeholders.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chair. Chair, first of all, many thanks to the stakeholders for the follow-up comments, and many thanks to the members for the questions and inquiries. I think what's best is if possibly there's a number of people here in the platform from the National Treasury who have the different expertise in the different areas, and I'm going to request them to come in, starting with local government. I think it's probably useful to be able to do that, and colleagues who deal with local government are also here. Let me also just indicate before I ask Okhali, who is the acting DDG for intergovernmental relations, to come in, just indicate to the chair on the matter of the meeting and attendance, and my apology, that the document that we got for the meeting was a generic invitation. It did not say that the minister, DM or DG needed to attend. It was a generic request to be here by the National Treasury. And the only reason I indicated an apology from the DG is simply because he would have liked to be here. But if the committee in future wants to have specific principles or specific leadership to be part of the meeting, we would certainly welcome that clarity going forward, because the one that I have in front of me is a generic invitation. Chair, with your permission, let me ask Ms. Okhala to come in on issues related to local government, because I think those are important issues to deal with first. Okhali?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members and colleagues. Thanks, Edgar. So I'll ask Jan to assist on the municipal debt. I will respond on the issue that was raised by I think one of the invitees on the issues of chronic underspending on education and health. And I'll also ask Jan to deal with the issues of monitoring local government in terms of what we are doing there. But just to say that I agree with members that we need more time, and we remain available for if members want us to come brief them more on local government in terms of the interventions that we are doing there, as like we did when we were doing the inductions for some committees. So maybe let me start, and then Jan will add on those two parts. So on the issues of chronic underspending by education and health, but just to indicate that members, in the past few years, we have not seen underspending that is more than 2% in those two departments. As a matter of fact, in some instances, they've been overspending because of the pressures that they have on their budgets. So we don't see that issue of underspending. And just to say that we have a number of interventions, I think similar to what Jan will indicate, is that we do monitor spending on provincial budgets, all departments. We get monthly reports from provinces. We monitor those. And we do have, we call them provincial budget visits, where we go and meet with each department in a province, go through their spending over the previous year and after the first quarter as well, to say, where are you and what are the challenges and how are you addressing these challenges? And we also, in that meetings, we partner with national departments so that we go together, because it's the concurrent function. So they need also to be present in those. And we also do the site visit, infrastructure site visits, where we check whether the delivery of infrastructure. And I must indicate that in terms of capacity, I think we're spending a lot of money on capacitating provinces, particularly on the infrastructure side. I mean, that kind of program we started as early as 2001, providing that support to provinces to ensure that they're able to deliver infrastructure, particularly education, health. As we speak now, both of them they do have their infrastructure units within, because previously they used not to have. So because we want to ensure that as much as they'll be implementing agents, but as a department, you're able to plan for infrastructure, and you plan on time so that you're able to spend the money. You are not, the whole point is that you don't plan and think that you'll go through procurement and implement at the same time. It's highly impossible. So that the planning is done well in advance, and then maybe at the beginning of the year, then we start with procurement of service providers to implement. So I think that's what we are doing there. And I must indicate that even in the case where there are some unspent funds or underspending on conditional grants, there's a rollover process that we follow. If the money is committed, we give it back to provinces to continue with those projects that they were implementing. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Jan to respond on the local government questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members. My name is Jan Hatten. I work in the Intergovernmental Relations Division with Uhali and her team. So, Chairperson, as far as the monitoring and oversight of local government is concerned, I think, Chair, perhaps we should take up the offer to spend time with a committee to take you through all the reforms that we've institutionalized over a number of years in the space of local government. Honourable Chair, just to give you a sense, once a year, we do publish the aggregated budgets of all 257 municipalities in a consolidated format. In terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, Chair, in terms of Section 71, we quarterly publish their financial results, including conditional grant performance. And Chair, all of these information is on our website, and we will certainly share the link with the Secretariat so that the members have full access to this information. We also have developed transparent tools, Chairperson, that on a mobile app or on your tablet or on your PC, you'll be able to look at the performance of all the municipalities. And that instrument we've designed deliberately to assist the public to understand the financial language that the Treasury normally uses, Chairperson. With regard to the Municipal Debt Relief Program, there's a linkage with the process that the Treasury initiated to take over the debt of Eskom. So, Chair, on the one hand, that was to assist Eskom to improve their balance sheet. On the municipal side, we have what you refer to the debt relief program. Chair, and perhaps for the benefit of the members, we should circulate that document as well. We have issued a guideline to the municipalities, and it's called MFMA Circular 124. So, Chair, largely what this program is trying to achieve, on the one hand, to deal with the financial sustainability issues in the space of municipalities. And there's about 14 conditions that we've set. So, Chair, just for the benefit of the members, we have had 72 municipalities that applied for this. We've approved 71 municipalities. And Chair, the program is designed largely to make sure that the current account is paid religiously by the municipalities to Eskom. That is the real overarching objective. Of the 71 municipalities, Chair, there's about 14 that I'm sure you've seen in the media statement where we have challenges, and specifically the ability to maintain their commitment. Chair, the program on itself is not going to solve the institutional and the significant challenges that's evident in these municipalities. And we have frequent engagement with Eskom as well as these municipalities to assist them to deal with their challenges. In addition to the monitoring and oversight responsibility, and also then informing the public of all the information that assists with the oversight, not only from a Treasury perspective, but from a parliamentary oversight perspective, and also the councils of these municipalities have that responsibility. We have also introduced a financial management improvement program, Chair, where the Treasury plays advisors in the municipalities, and it's a free prompt approach. So there's advisors that work in the national, provincial, and municipalities. All of that is to assist them with not only dealing with planning-related challenges, Chair, also budget formulation and support, the oversight responsibility, the dealing with debt. We have got a revenue improvement program to assist municipalities. Chair, so municipalities have extensive tax powers, but they don't necessarily exercise that. And one of the fundamental challenges that we're dealing with in the system as a whole, Chair, is the enforcement of credit control. One of the members have raised the issue about Eskom is now dealing decisively with the city of Joburg. So, Chair, the numbers that's in the public domain that Eskom indicate as what municipalities owe them versus what's in the debt relief program, Chair, it's important to understand the difference. The amount quoted by Eskom is approximately 80 billion rand, but in the debt relief program that we formally agreed with Eskom to be part of a debt relief program is about 56.8 billion rand, Chair. And sometimes they don't communicate this properly in the public domain, because if a municipality meet the conditions, and then they will write off their debt in 3 installments over a 3-year period. The Chair, in the Minister of Finance's speech, he did reference the first municipality that was successful in their debt relief write-off process, because they've consistently conformed to the requirement. Largely, Chair, there's 2 other municipalities that soon we will make the announcement that also been successful. So there's a lot of colleagues or people in the public domain that think the program is not successful, Chair. The point, it's a program to help and go through a systematic logic where ultimately these municipalities need to be brought onto a sustainable path. And the debt relief program on itself is not going to be a silver bullet to deal with these matters. So, Chair, that's in a nutshell. But with your permission, Chair, we can share not only the link to all the information we host on the National Treasury website on municipalities, but also the circular that we've issued with regard to debt relief. And perhaps if the members also want to see our annual budget circulars where we guide municipalities on how to formulate meaningful budgets. Chair, let me stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, Chair, we will continue with our replies. I am going to ask at some point colleagues from Economic Policy, Boypuso Modise is here, as well as Mr. Chris Axelson, to deal with the tax revenue issues, and perhaps colleagues from Public Finance to deal with some of the social grants, any specifics that might be raised there. But before I do that, let me just go through some quick responses on our side that were raised by stakeholders and honorable members. Firstly, let me acknowledge, as I did at the beginning, that when one has to reply to 2 days of questions, comments, and statements in a 45 or so minute presentation, there's always a chance that someone will feel that their particular issue was not addressed in sufficient detail, or something was put in an annex. This is a difficult problem to solve, but I am sorry for those that feel, including the IEJ, that something was relegated. That was not the intention. The intention was that we have a time constraint, and we're perfectly happy to unpack these issues, which is why I made a big emphasis on engaging and welcoming engagements, including direct meetings. With respect to the question from Kosatu, or the statement about whether we're being unambitious on infrastructure and jobs, I will answer that question at the same time that I deal with the point from Honorable Molefe about what is the spending plans on infrastructure and SOEs over the medium term. Obviously, to Kosatu, one can have a debate about what's up with this. Sorry, someone's unmuted, but I'll continue. As indicated, including in the presentation, I didn't have time to go through each bullet point, but it is, honorable members, in the presentation, the amounts, the global amount, the details of the breakdown, including for state-owned enterprise and public entities, is available in Annexure D of the 2024 budget review. And as indicated in my presentation, those plans for expenditure are still there. Different people can argue about whether or not those are ambitious or not ambitious, whether Kosatu feels they're ambitious or not. That's a debate, I guess, subjectively, that one can have. But the specific plans are outlined in Annexure D of the 2024 budget review. To be specific, table D1. Honorable Molefe and the colleagues from Kosatu can refer to them, and they are in the website in that regard. There was a statement from the IEJ about something along the lines of investment in people is treated as a cost. We respectfully disagree. I don't think that if we thought that investment in people is viewed as a cost, I don't think that we would have one of the largest social protection spending as a percentage of GDP of any developing country in the world, according to the World Bank. I don't think that we would spend most of the budget on the social wage if we thought that it was just a cost. There was a time where we were spending a little bit less on the social wage. We have taken steps, and this is important on the conversation around trade-offs, to whenever it is that we have received greater than expected revenues, which of course hasn't happened in a while, but it did happen in 2021 and a little bit in 2022 when we had a commodity boom. We took most of that money and we put it into spending, and most of that spending was on the social wage, with some of it going to capital expenditure. So we have tried, under a significantly constrained environment, to prioritize some of these things. We accept and recognize that it would be great if we could do more, and we would love to be able to do more. But as we have sought to illustrate, we are operating under significant constraints. But I think it's difficult, and we would have to be engaged in numbers in this regard, beyond sentiment, on the statement that somehow we have not sought to prioritize in the conversation around trade-offs, the social wage. And we welcome those pieces of data from the stakeholders if they feel that that is the case. With respect to the question that was raised by the Public Economic Project, PEP, on whether or not we talk about unemployment, poverty, and inequality, we accept that we could say more in this regard. What we've tried to do in the presentation is, on one of the slides, we have included a link to some research papers that have done on a variety of different issues, including as it relates to unemployment. In addition to that, the 5th chapter of the MTBPS, chapter 5, includes a reflection on employment multipliers across different sectors of the economy. And the reasons why we have decided to focus on infrastructure includes the fact that we consider that employment multipliers in the construction sector are quite strong. And we showed that data in Chapter 5. So to the question about whether or not that's been considered, it has been considered, and it is there. With respect to the AIDC's comment on fiscal risks emanating from PPPs, we talk about the fact that PPPs do represent a fiscal risk. There's a slide in the presentation. Again, I was not able to go through all of the points that talk specifically about PPPs and how we are aiming to address risk mitigation in respect of PPPs by a risk-sharing model that is being improved through the reforms that the MTBPS refers to, particularly in Chapter 5 that are there. So there was a slide in that regard, but again, didn't have time to go through each bullet point, but I would refer members to it. With respect to the issue around models and data and submissions, what I think, maybe if I can make a suggestion in this regard, Honorable Chair and Honorable members, that can take us forward in this issue of data and models and so on and so forth. Perhaps let me propose a suggestion as part of my response. The National Treasury, when we table and when publish information, we don't just publish the data that the minister himself tables before Parliament. We publish enormous amounts of spreadsheets in our website that anybody, any member of the public can go and look at. And if you go on the website now, we've got everything from time series data going back to the 1980s in some cases, main budget estimates of national revenue going back to 1983, data on total debt of government going back to 1978. We've got information on the assumptions that inform the GDP forecast, all published. I could go on and on and on. If members feel that they have gone through this data, they've looked at the spreadsheets, and they believe that there's something there that they are missing, it might help us to get a sense of exactly what it is that we are missing, that honorable members need, so that we can take a look at that. Because I do agree this matter has been raised again and again. But, Honorable Chair, it's very difficult when you are working hard to push as many spreadsheets and as much data as possible onto the website, graphs and all manner of things, consolidated accounts of government, pivot sheets and so forth, to then be asked for more models and data. I think at some point we have to perhaps have a more kind of bilateral engagement with people where we try and understand exactly where this is. Again, I have indicated in the previous Parliament that there are some pieces of data, particularly on the taxation side, which we have been asked for, which we have explained in emails, phone calls, and direct meetings we've had in our offices or in virtual links with some of stakeholders, where we can't give it to them because, for example, it includes the private information of taxpayers or information which relates to international cross-border information where we would need the permission of other countries to provide it. And that was the case, for example, with respect to the SACU customs data of countries like Eswatini, Botswana, and Namibia, whose permission we would need to give that. So we do have limitations, but I would suggest that we just perhaps get a sense of, having looked at what we do have, what do you think is missing there? And we will see what we can do in terms of helping out. I think, you know, the comment from the Parliamentary Budget Office that we're giving the same answer, I would respond to that comment in this way, in two ways. The first way, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, as we have been at pains to explain several times, including today, our strategy is a multi-year strategy. And the specifics of the fiscal strategy were conceived and approved by Cabinet as far back as October 2020, when we presented a medium-term budget policy statement in that Parliament. Since that time, Cabinet has approved the fiscal framework that has come to Parliament each year, including the fiscal strategy, which is a multi-year strategy. One of the components of that multi-year strategy that was presented to Parliament in 2020 was that we would stabilize debt by 2025. In other words, everything that we are doing in respect of debt, not the other things have got their own components, including SOEs, etc. But with respect of debt and the fiscal framework, is a multi-year story that is a consistent strategy that must achieve that objective in 2025-26. Following the formation of the Government of National Unity, we went back to Cabinet and we asked, are you still happy with the strategy? Cabinet said, yes, please proceed with the strategy. And that's why it was tabled by the minister last week, the MTBPS. So it's difficult to understand why the PBO would say, well, give us different answers. Don't give us the same answer. When actually the point is this is a multi-year strategy where if we have to give a different answer, that seems to suggest that we're no longer moving in the same approach. Indeed, the PBO has asked a lot of the same questions also over the last few years. So I guess to the extent that our strategy remains the same, I don't know how we can give a different answer on the fiscal strategy if the strategy has been approved yet again. With respect to some of the questions, and then I'll hand over to Boipuso and then Chris. The NDP, to Honorable Molefe's point about the NDP is referenced in the MTBPS. It's referenced in the context of the investment target and the reason for why we're making the big push in respect of infrastructure. The MTBPS, in that regard, does talk to the NDP. With respect to the purpose of the MTBPS, the question that was asked by Honorable Brits, that's why we included a slide on its origins and its history. However, we can provide more information on background in that regard. Yes, we have noted that Fitch does not agree with National Treasury on the debt stabilization path, but there are others who also have different views. I think, of course, different organizations can have different levels of optimism and pessimism around our growth path, and that informs part of why the numbers that they have are what they are. But of course, to answer your question about how the committee can assist with achieving debt stabilization in 2025-26, we strongly believe that the fiscal strategy that we have presented, if we keep to it, we will be able to stabilize debt as a percentage of GDP in 2025-26. With respect to the question around the MTDP from Honorable Van Rooyen, I think what I can say there is the MTDP, as I indicated earlier in my presentation, is a successor to the MTSF. It is a cabinet plan. Our tabling of the MTBPS is in line with the requirements of legislation and the law in respect of that. And as I've indicated, the 4 pillars that are outlined in the MTBPS are consistent with the MTDP that is with cabinet. We don't control when the MTDP gets presented to Parliament, but we are obligated in terms of the law when to present the MTBPS and what elements must be included in it, as I indicated in my presentation, Section 6 of the Money Bills Procedure and Amendment Act says that. Honorable Ryder makes the comment that just because you're winning the race, you should not slow down. Honorable Ryder, we're certainly not slowing down. We are implementing new measures as we speak to not only improve transparency, but as indicated, we're producing all manner of things. I can't talk about all of them because of time, but just one example. I don't know how many honorable members have taken the time to look at the budget dashboard that we've created and included in the website. It's not for children only, but it's for everybody. It shows very detailed information around the numbers that that inform and are part of the background of the budget. But that's over and above the People's Guide and the new People's Guide to the MTBPS that we introduced last week, and more things that we will work on as we go along. So we take that very, very seriously in respect of the budget. On the question around industrialization, job creation, and other things, colleagues can touch on that. Of course, some of that is within the mandate of the DTIC. With respect to the comment from Honorable Bateman on how we've thought about this, yes, Honorable Bateman, you are correct. We have decided to basically put ourselves in a situation where it is more likely that there would be an upward surprise to growth rather than a downward surprise. We think that it's better, both in terms of our growth estimates and our revenue estimates, to be in a position where things are better than what you thought than for them to be worse than what you thought. And so that observation is certainly accurate. Chair, I've gone on a little bit, but I do need to ask if colleagues, if Boipuso can come in on the growth side, and then Chris on the tax issues. Boipuso?
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you, Chair and honorable members. I am Boipuso Modise. I head economic policy at the National Treasury. Mr. Sishi has answered most of the questions that relate to the comments and feedback that we've received. That is always valuable and appreciated. So I won't spend very much time. I will make 3 reflections, however, to augment Mr. Sishi's initial comments. The first in relation to providing clarity on what assumptions fundamentally drive how we think about growth, the growth outlook, and how that then filters through to our views on critical macroeconomic indicators like unemployment, inequality, and poverty. Specifically in relation to the MTBPS, we provide a chart of the assumptions that inform the outlook on page 13. So stakeholders and honorable members can refer to those for a detailed account of some of the key indicators that we look at in our assumptions that inform the baseline. The second is a reflection on feedback that we've received from several stakeholders regarding the Treasury's view on poverty, inequality, and unemployment. The first is to say that these are indicators that we track very closely and that very much inform our outlook, not only on the growth strategy, but also on our view on policy proposals from a policy analysis, advocacy, and advice perspective. We track these, as many other economic commentators do, through the high-frequency data that Statistics South Africa provides, but also to indicate that we do a lot of policy analysis on these very important issues, not only internally in the Treasury by staff members as we do our work that informs our policy analysis and position, but also through research partnerships like the SA Tide program that Mr. Sishi spoke to. I presume that's the link that he's referring to. If not, we can provide that link as well. Specifically, we have an entire work stream dedicated, specifically work stream 3, to assessing unemployment, inequality. There is extensive amount of research published on there by independent researchers, some in collaboration with Treasury staff, others purely independently, in order to help us understand the dynamics of unemployment, the dynamics of inequality in the context of the South African economy, to help us formulate and calibrate our policy responses so that they are appropriate for dealing with South Africa's issues, which of course are significant and subsequently take up a significant amount of our time and energy from a policy-making perspective. The final thing that I'll say in this regard is the MTBPS in Chapter 2 also makes reference to ongoing work that we're currently doing on labor market dynamics in South Africa, to ensure that the evidence base that we use to calibrate our policies and that then filter up into this 4-pillar growth strategy that we've spoken to are appropriate and fit for purpose in the South African context. We will continue to give feedback on that analysis in different iterations of the budget and the MTBPS documentation as we do, and we'll continue to place emphasis as some of these issues come up, which are important for addressing these important socioeconomic challenges. The second broad observation that I'll make relates to the NDP. Two honourable members asked two very important questions. The first was, to what extent is there any consideration or linkage between Operation Vulindlela, its listed interventions, and the NDP? And also, how do we table the MTBPS in the absence of the completion of the MTDP? These questions are related. Mr. Sishi, I think, answered the bulk of it. However, I think it's important to flag that all policy initiatives that we've seen, including the ERRP, including the Treasury's Towards a Growth Strategy paper, as well as the priority and focus areas of Operation Vulindlela, are guided by and continue to be guided by the overarching economic vision document or strategy for South Africa, which is represented or finds expression in the NDP. So there is no daylight between these documents to answer the question directly. And to be even more direct and precise, the presentation explicitly relates to this relationship between Operation Vulindlela, the MTDP, and the ERRP, and the NDP in the slide deck. And maybe in the interest of time, honourable members weren't able to properly reflect on that, but to give the assurance that that linkage is made explicitly in the presentation that's been provided. I think there are two other points that I'll make more briefly. The first is a clarification point. Kosato made the very good observation that targeting 1 million jobs in isolation is not adequate to fundamentally move the needle from an unemployment perspective. That is correct. The number that is referenced in the slide deck relating to 1 million jobs relates to the economic analysis or possible impact of Operation Vulindlela interventions in isolation. It was in relation to the work of Operation Vulindlela. As we've mentioned, Operation Vulindlela presents a subset of the border reform agenda of government, and it is necessary and important, but it is not the full extent of what needs to be done, nor is it the full extent of our view or ambitions around addressing unemployment, inequality, and poverty in South Africa. The final thing that I'll say, I think, speaks to the theme, and Mr. Sishi's covered this as well, but I'll say it briefly in closing. Relates to the feedback that we've received, that there are different views in terms of economic policy, the perspectives thereof, as well as research relating to policy interventions and their outcomes. Our view has been and remains that evidence-led policy making is important. Subsequently, contestation on economic policy and on policy efficacy and impact is necessary and important, which is why we've continued to be part of processes such as this one, which is why we've continued to advocate for engagement at bilateral and multilateral levels in order to ensure that we're able to provide our view and gain feedback from stakeholders as we're doing in this forum. So I think it's necessary and it's important for us to have contestation and discussions in these views. We may agree on some of it and we may not, but I think that the approach that we've adopted, which is a helpful one and a useful one, is one of engagement in order for us to understand each other's perspectives better. And I think we've done a very good job of that. And Mr. Sishi has indicated that we are continued to this open engagement and as ever remain available to have these engagements with interested parties in order for us to find or rather build an evidence base that we can make the right policy conclusions from. I think this covers me, unless there's any other follow-ups, which we're happy to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Edgar said it would turn to me on the tax issues. So good morning, honourable members, honourable chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, just to firstly clarify the point about what is the MTBPS for. It's for this longer term strategy, as Mr. Sishi explained. We don't use the MTBPS as a mechanism for the Ministry of Finance to announce new taxes or new ways to raise revenue. Only in exceptional circumstances are some tax announcements made. We normally always keep that for the budget. However, it's perfectly fine if commentators do want to come to this forum to put forward tax measures. They must just realize that we wouldn't be making those announcements in the MTBPS. As you would have seen there are a lot of differing views on tax. Some commentators want taxes to be increased, others want them to be decreased. We get a lot of differing views on specific items of taxation, for example, on the health promotion levy. Some commentators wanted to be removed, others wanted to be increased. On the employment tax incentive, a very similar scenario, the same with wealth taxes. So the one thing I wanted to point out to the members was that not all the commentators are in this forum. So sometimes there are a lot of commentators pushing one particular position here, but there are others who have very differing views that just aren't here. We try to take a look at all of the differing perspectives. We try to do our own analysis on what we think is the most appropriate way forward. A lot of it involves very difficult, sometimes subjective trade-offs. We try to be as objective and have as much data as possible, but the world is not a place where there is perfect data on everything. So there are differing views. For example, on the employment tax incentive, I think it's one of the tax incentives that has got the most research done on it of all tax incentives in South Africa. Some said there was no impact. Some papers said there was a positive but small impact. You know, we took those papers to NEDLAC. We've taken them to Parliament. Parliament asked NEDLAC to do a review on it, and it was NEDLAC that recommended to Parliament for it to be extended to 2029. It is a question about, you know, what would you do if it was removed? You know, what would be replaced, as was raised. So these are difficult decisions that we try to come to. On the wealth tax, there was also a question there about what is our thinking on the wealth tax. As per the Davis Tax Committee's recommendations, they said we needed to get more data. So we made a budget announcement a couple of years ago that for the following year, individuals with an net asset value or net asset holdings above 50 million would be required to declare all their wealth so that we could get a better picture of the wealth within the country. SARS are collating that data, they're putting it together. We are going to then work with SARS to try and understand the levels of wealth that have been declared to SARS in the country and what a potential wealth tax would be. There were some questions about, you know, we are conflating income from wealth and wealth. It's an interesting point, and we've had a lot of advice on this from international organizations. For example, you know, some of the advice is that if you can tax the returns to wealth in a very expansive way, you don't need to tax wealth itself, because in effect you are. So whether you tax wealth or you have a tax on the return to wealth, they could in effect be similar if the rates of return were a particular level. So in South Africa, we have a very comprehensive personal income tax system that does tax all these returns to wealth, dividends, capital gains, interest, if it's rentals, and that is what we have focused on. But we will be considering that wealth tax as we get that data from SARS and we can do further analysis. There was another point on the confused about the point on stability for international tax arrangements. I think the point we were trying to make there is that you need global cooperation. If you have global cooperation, then you can do particular measures that all countries buy into that then would benefit South Africa. For example, there's Pillar 2 on the global minimum tax for corporates that we have announced in budget and are implementing this year. That is a benefit for us, but it could only be done through global cooperation because all countries are doing it. And we need stability in that sense, but we will still try and push to have a progressive benefits to South Africa in those negotiations. I think that covers all the issues. Thank you, honourable members.
Chair, I just want to check if there's any additional. Okay, Rendani, you want to come in? Thanks.
Thanks, Edgar. Good morning once more, honorable members. It's Rendani. I will try to deal with two issues raised, starting with the post office. There are some engagements going on between our minister and the Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies, with BRPs included in those meetings. But if we look since 2016 until 2023, 10 billion was given to post office for recapitalization and trying to turn it around. So given that 10 billion, one of the questions that our minister is asking is, what innovation are we bringing to this business so that we don't face the same problem of bailing out the post office? So, and again, for immediate needs, certain proposals were put forward to the post office, but the discussions are still going on. Let me come to SRD, and I will link SRD with the public employment agenda. There was a direct question asked as to whether will the National Treasury be extending the SRD. That is not the policy decision that the National Treasury can take. That's a policy decision that government through cabinet should take. Ours is just to attach the cost to that policy decision. For example, a decision was taken that the grant will be increased by 20 rand from 350 to 370. Ours is to attach cost to that decision. As a result, the MTBPS, in the MTBPS, there is 1.6 billion associated with that decision taken. So the 60% of SRD recipients, they are below the age of 35. And some of them, they've got qualification. So one of the questions, I'm trying to link this now with the public employment initiatives like EPWP, public employment programs, community works program. Can't we then explore maybe transitioning them to something meaningful? Page 35 of the MTBPS, there's a box in there makes reference to the ALMPs, active labor market programs, the study that we are conducting. Because part of the problem that we're experiencing is that there's a lot of fragmentation, double dipping, duplication, etc. No single point of entry, etc. For example, CWP, a community works program. It was found that I think 35,000 or so of the recipients of CWP, they were also the recipients of old age grant. So these are some of the examples of duplication and fragmentation. So in the end, the agenda will be trying to optimize or maximize job opportunities, especially that things are done differently for each program. The unit cost for some is high. So the study is underway and it's a priority project for both the minister and the DG. So once the study is concluded, then it will go through the cabinet process in terms of implementing the recommendation. Thanks very much, Chair. Back to you.
Chair, I think that there was one other, sorry, so that we cover the issues. There was a question around from Honorable Molefe about debt, why about ratings and why we are not borrowing from other markets besides AEs. If I could ask, I think Wanga Xibi is here. If maybe she could take that one, or either her or Vessel Moorman. Wanga, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, Chair and honorable members. There were three questions I think they were asked around debt. First question was around why not access instruments such as the Sukuk. Maybe to respond to that is that part of our funding strategy is to access the different types of instruments that we can use to raise debt. And so diversifying our instruments is crucial to our funding strategy. We did issue a Sukuk a year ago in the market, which we believe was successful. We still plan to issue a Sukuk or tap the existing issuances going into this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. There was a question also around bilaterals. Since 2020, at the height of COVID, when we were downgraded, and also at the time where we were kicked out of the Week B index, we've been negotiating and concluding quite a number of bilateral loans. So you've got the BRICS Bank, who have provided more than $4 billion to the sovereign. You've got the French, you've got the Germans, you've got the Japanese, who have recently joined part of the lender group as well. And so this assists us in lowering our cost of funding. And even going further over the medium term, we still continue to access the bilateral loans with these institutions, because we do understand that it is cheaper, and also they do provide us with grace periods of when, you know, we can start doing the capital repayments. There was also a question around the risks to the funding strategy. And maybe before I get to that, so the bilateral loans, you will find them on Chapter 7 of the budget. We do update that every budget. So you'll find a table there with all the bilateral loans that we have concluded since 2020 up to date. We will be updating it at the next budget with any new loans that we have concluded within this fiscal year. And so if you look at Chapter 7 also of the budget review, we do detail the risks to the financing strategy, which one of the main risks to the funding strategy is the higher borrowing costs, also the weaker growth and revenue performance, as well as a weaker exchange rate, which we believe could pose risks to the domestic and foreign debt portfolios. Lastly, one of the main risks to the strategy is the materialization of contingent liabilities at state-owned entities, which could increase funding needs and associated costs. Chair, I think I have responded to those three questions. Thanks.
Chair, I think that's it from our side. Those are the responses. I hope we haven't missed anything for whatever reason. It's not through intention. It might be just, if there's something that we've missed, we kindly request that we can just be reminded of it. Alternatively, if there is no time, we're perfectly happy to provide written responses. But with that, Chair, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Dr. Edgar, Sishi, and the team. Thanks very much for your response. And I believe that if there is anything that the members would like to get clarity on, they will write to you, as you indicated earlier, that your doors are open. And honorable members, I want to check with Dr. Masongani if there's anything that you want to say before we close the meeting.
Thank you, Chairperson, Honorable Ndlovu. Welcome the presentation from National Treasury, inputs from the stakeholders, because we become more informed as we get contributions from the public.
Dr. Masongani?
Hello.
I want to check. I see the hand of Honorable Ryder. I don't know what is it for. Is it a legacy hand?
No, Chair. I just wanted to know that what it means to but obviously there's going to be a report coming out of this. I see it's on the program for Tuesday. Perhaps we can just address when Mr. Masongani is finished. We can just address when we can expect that report in draft format so that we can interrogate it ahead of the meeting. But I apologize for interrupting. Thank you.
Please don't do that. If there is anything, you can just write whatever you want on the chat so that we don't disrupt anyone. Thanks very much. Honorable Masongani?
Thanks, Chair. Chairperson, I was still saying that as a public representatives, we become more informed when the public makes contributions either orally or in a written form. So we welcome the inputs from the stakeholders and, of course, the two bodies that assist these finance committees, PBO and FFC. It is quite important, Chairperson, that the sooner there is clarity about this MTDP, the better, so that we are clear as to which economic trajectory is the country going to take moving forward now that there is no MTSF. There has been a number of policy documents that government has put out to the public. We have the ERRP. There was one that we once had a session with the late Honorable Minister Tito Mboweni. I remember when we were in the NEC of the ANC, he even presented it in Benoni, where we had El Khouta. I don't know what happened to that document. So the sooner there is clarity about the MTDP, the better. But what needs to be emphasized, Chairperson, is that in the situation that we find ourselves in, the state must play a very, very important role. There's no way that you can say that the state has got no role to play. It has never happened anywhere, and it is not happening now as we speak. All these big economies that you see growing, it is because the state has got a role that it is playing. Whether you are talking about China, South Korea, Singapore, in all those big economies, the state has got a role that it is playing. And it is time that the South African state must play a very active role. And it can do so when, for instance, you have got state-owned enterprises that are equal to the task, that it should not always that they are being bailed out. Probably at some stage, Chairperson, we might have to have a session with the presidency now that the SOEs are in the presidency, just to understand whether there is a turnaround strategy about the SOEs. Because unless the SOEs become very critical in playing their role, it will be very difficult for a state to have capacity to play that role. And when we talk about the state's action leading to rapid economic growth, it can't just be economic growth. In whose benefit should that economic grow? It should be an inclusive kind of an economic growth that requires a broad-based transformation to break down structural impediments to new economic activities, deconcentrate industries dominated by few participants, and accelerate the inclusion of millions of blacks into the jobs and business. The type of economy that we have, Chairperson, is exclusive and it's a reality. The sooner we talk about an inclusive economy that brings black people into the mainstream, women, youth, people with disability, the better. So that is very critical, that we don't just talk about economic growth every time this economy had to grow. In whose benefit? It must include those who have been previously disadvantaged. So that is very critical. So I hope when we meet again with Treasury in February, there will be clear plans as to how is the Treasury and government as a whole taking the country to in terms of economic growth, which everybody thinks will be a panacea to the problems that we are facing. Thanks very much, Chairperson and the colleagues. Moving forward, what's going to happen? Because I've seen the revised program of Parliament. It's quite a very, very tight program between now and the 3rd of December for the NA. So now that Treasury has responded, it means the two support teams from the Select and the Standing Committee will have to start compiling a report which they will have to present on Tuesday. Because if I'm not mistaken, the Secretariat, on the side of the NA, we are expected to debate the revised fiscal framework on Wednesday next week, so that we can hand over the process to appropriations. So that's what I've seen so far. And then to yourselves, of course, next week, Tuesday, both committees, that is Standing Committee Finance and Select Committee Finance, will have to adopt the revised fiscal framework report. So that's the process between now and next week, and then taking the process from next week forward to appropriations. Then NA, if I'm not mistaken, will adopt the appropriations report on the division of revenue on the 3rd of December, somewhere there. But the Secretariat can assist with the dates so that we are moving with the necessary speed to process all these reports. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Dr. Masongani. And let me take this opportunity to thank the stakeholders who came to assist the Parliament with their views on how the revised fiscal framework and revenue proposal must be structured. I think Honorable Masongani has managed to outline the process going forward so that all of us, we can be able to know what will happen next week. And with those few words, honorable members, stakeholders, thanks very much for your participation, and hope that even next time when we are invited, you'll be able to come and assist the Parliament. Thanks very much. The meeting stands adjourned.